Horse racing is more than sporting action. It's beauty in the clean early morning air. It's the dedication of horse people who work in daylight and darkness 365 days a year. It's the animals themselves, nature's masterpieces, works of art, but athletes too, full of power and that indefinable quality called heart. All that horse racing represents is summed up in the Triple Crown. The Triple Crown makes the name of a horse live on, and it changes the lives of the people around the horse, jockeys, owners, and trainers. But the Triple Crown is for all the people, too. In fact, it's an annual part of their lives. It was first called the Triple Crown by racing writer Charles Hatton. And in more than 100 years, only 11 horses have won it. It makes young boys of 18 national heroes. And does the same for young horses, age 3. It is the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes. These are the jewels of the Triple Crown. Hello, I'm Jim McKay at Churchill Downs in Kentucky. Behind me, the twin spires that are the symbol of the Kentucky Derby. The Kentucky Derby each year begins the story that we're here to tell today, the story of the Triple Crown. For centuries now, horse racing has been called the sport of kings. We're here today to talk about the kings of the sport. Why is the Triple Crown so important in American racing? Well, it's because these are young horses, just 3-year-olds, and in the span of only 5 weeks, they're asked to run further than they have ever run before, and to do it 3 times under the greatest of pressure. To win all 3 is the ultimate challenge, and in the long history of the Triple Crown, it's only been accomplished 11 times. Sir Barton was the first Triple Crown winner, but no one knew it until the 3 races were first called that by Charles Hatton many years later. Sir Barton simply won 3 races called the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. He was a sore-footed grouch who ignored other horses and hated all humans except his groom, Toots Thompson, not the stuff of which stars are made. He was ridden by Johnny Loftus, whose expectations were not high on Derby Day. Loftus, a member of the Jockeys' Hall of Fame, was a master of pace, but Sir Barton at that point was a maiden, had never won a race. Owner J.K.L. Ross, a Canadian, brought him to Louisville as a rabbit for his stablemate, Billy Kelly. Trainer Guy Bedwell specialized in making silk purses out of sow's ears. But Sir Barton was a challenge. The plan really was for Sir Barton to go out fast and burn out the other contenders, including the favorite Eternal, allowing Billy Kelly to come on strong at the end and take the trophy back to Canada. And so it looked for most of the race. But Sir Barton didn't quit. The horse who had finished 15th in the Hopeful as a 2-year-old burned out the favorite all right. Eternal finished 10th, but he also beat his stablemate by 5 lengths and won the Derby. So they decided to try him again only 4 days later in the Preakness at Pimlico in Baltimore. Many thought his win was a fluke, but with only 3 days' rest, Sir Barton took on Eternal again and 9 other more rested horses, and he made believers out of the doubters. Sir Barton took the lead early, once again held on to it all the way, and beat Eternal by a solid 4 lengths. 10 days later, he won the Withers. No doubters now. There were only 2 challengers this time in the Belmont. He whipped them handily to complete his sweep and went on to become Horse of the Year. The next year, he was matched against the new star Man o' War in what was billed as the race of the century. In fact, it was no race at all. Man o' War destroyed Sir Barton, who never won another race and soon was retired. He lies today in this small park in Douglas, Wyoming. He was a failure at stud in Virginia and eventually stood at an Army remount station in Nebraska for a fee of $5 to $10. A Douglas man bought him, and sometime after his death, the Junior Chamber of Commerce bought this inexpensive plastic likeness of a horse and buried Sir Barton beneath it. It wasn't much of a statue, they said, but it was all they could afford. Gallant Fox came along during the Depression. His jockey, the famous Earl Sandy, had retired but lost his money in the stock market crash and came back to ride the Fox. On the day Grover Cleveland was inaugurated in 1884, a boy named Jim Fitzsimmons started galloping horses. Sonny Jim, they called him. In time, he became one of the sport's great trainers, bent and hobbled by arthritis in his back, but still Sonny Jim. He trained Gallant Fox. In 1930, the Preakness was run 8 days before the Derby. A crowd of 40,000 gathered at Pimlico on a Friday afternoon. Gallant Fox, who had won the Wood Memorial easily, was the even money favorite. Without a starting gate, it took 6.5 minutes to get the horses all in line. The Fox had a disturbing habit of letting the other horses leave the gate, then chasing them, and so he did briefly in the Preakness. But Sandy got after him. Gallant Fox was in a pocket, but the jockey, with the skill that made him a legend, maneuvered his horse through the pack. He would be third at the far turn and second at the top of the stretch, and then Sandy sent him. He battled the leader, an 11-to-1 shot named Crack Brigade, all the way down that stretch. It was a question of heart now, and Gallant Fox had the heart of a champion. He won by 3/4 of a length. Next, the Derby. 60,000 turned out in a driving rain to watch the Fox face 14 challengers. That's Lord Derby on the left, with Colonel Matt Wynn, the great promoter who brought the Derby to its status as a national occasion. The 15 horses went to the post on a track labeled as good. Once again, Gallant Fox showed his tendency to get into trouble at the start. Unlike Sir Barton, he loved to have other horses around him. Wouldn't even work out unless 2 or 3 other horses went with him. Sandy knew this and again suffered through the early traffic patiently. Alcibiades was the leader, followed by Buckeye Poet. They presented no real threat. And Gallant Fox took the lead on the backstretch. At the half-mile pole, he led by 1, and at the quarter pole by 2. Alcibiades was finished now, but Gallant Knight made a brief challenge. It wasn't enough. The run through the stretch was a run to glory. They called him the Fox of Bel Air now, after owner Woodward's Bel Air stud in Maryland. The winning margin was just 2 lengths, but the Fox had slowed down. Maybe he was just feeling lonely out there by himself. It was the 3rd Derby win for Sandy. Only the great black jockey Isaac Murphy had accomplished that before him back in the 1800s. Of the Woodward horses' earlier challengers in the Classics, only Swinfield, who had finished 9th in the Preakness, went to the post in the Belmont. This time, the gregarious Gallant Fox didn't wait around to play with the others at the start. Sandy hustled him right out of there and into the lead. The favorite Which One was last behind Questionnaire and Swinfield. There would be no doubt on this day. Gallant Fox was the best of his crop. The Triple Crown would be the climax of Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons' career, which spanned 46 years at that time, although he had many more years and many more triumphs ahead of him. For owner Woodward, it was the ultimate satisfaction. He cared very little about 2-year-old racing and had his horses pointed for the Classics. Now he had the Triple Crown. Claiborne Farm was Gallant Fox's birthplace, and it was there that he returned to stud duty when a fever and cough caused his retirement at the end of his 3-year-old season. What a season it was. After the Belmont, he won the Dwyer and the Arlington Classic, the Lawrence Realization at 1 mile and 5/8, and the Jockey Club Gold Cup, in which only one other horse dared to test him. The only blemish on the year was when Gallant Fox suffered one of racing's greatest upsets. In the mud at Saratoga, he was an 8-length loser to a 100-to-1 shot named Jim Dandy. He's buried beside his sire and dam at Claiborne, and his epitaph says it well. He swept like a meteor across the racing sky in 1930. Five years later, the genes of Gallant Fox returned in his son Omaha. It was déjà vu for owner and trainer, but jockey Willie Saunders was a new addition to the team. It was a damp, chilly, miserable day, with the track listed as good, not fast. It would be a standing start for the 1935 Derby, and there were 18 horses, a starter's nightmare. Omaha had only won 2 races in his life. Still, he was second choice in the betting to the filly Nellie Flagg, ridden by a young jockey making his first Derby appearance, Eddie Arcaro. What Arcaro knew and the bettors didn't was that Nellie Flagg wasn't herself that day. It was the wrong time of the month for the filly. Jockey Saunders bided his time. In the backstretch, Omaha flew past the others into the lead and was in front as they turned for home. Roman Soldier challenged, but Omaha held on to win the Derby. As is so often the case, the experts still were not impressed. They were still remembering his 2-year-old season, in which he won only once in 10 starts, and his 3rd-place finish in the Wood Memorial just 12 days before the Derby. Jockey Saunders, the pride of Bozeman, Montana, had no such qualms. Trainer Fitzsimmons had a new opportunity after 50 years in the sport to train 2 Triple Crown winners. From the Roses of Kentucky, it then was time for Omaha to move on to the Black-Eyed Susans of Maryland and the old Pimlico Racecourse and the Preakness Stakes. If he could win this one, he would become the first son of a Preakness winner ever to win the Preakness, and be only 1 victory away from being the first son of a Triple Crown winner to win the Triple Crown. It took 3.5 minutes to line them up for the standing start this time. But when they finally moved off to a slow, cautious start, Willie Saunders kept his horse relaxed, well off the pace in 6th position, allowing an 84-to-1 shot named Brannan to take the lead. Only Firethorn and Nellie Flagg were expected to challenge Omaha. Brannan led until the top of the stretch, but then he faded like a black-eyed Susan in September. Omaha moved to the outside of the leaders and went to the front. Now Firethorn made his move, going quickly from 7th to 4th to 2nd, but it was too late. Omaha looked like a champion this time. No fading finish, just a strong 6-length victory to set the stage for the Triple Crown. The Belmont was to take place 4 weeks later. And so it did on a miserable day in June. The track was sloppy, the spectators were drenched, but the excitement was still there. What was now known as the Triple Crown was on the line. Again, Firethorn would prove the most trouble for Omaha, although Rosemont, who had passed up the Derby in the Preakness, was second choice in the betting. But Rosemont was forced wide on the first turn and never threatened. Omaha stayed on Firethorn's shoulder, and when Firethorn moved to the top of the stretch, so did he. They fought it out, but Omaha was clearly the best and had won the Triple Crown. Omaha ended his days as a pensioner at a farm near his namesake city. And when he died, he was buried at the Axarben racetrack in Omaha. Before that, he had gone to England to race, the only Triple Crown winner to do that. And he won several important races, although he lost the Ascot Gold Cup by a nose. He was a failure at stud. But he was the 3rd winner of the Triple Crown, and for that, he'll be remembered. War Admiral was the smallest son of America's most famous racehorse, Man o' War, who almost certainly would have won the Triple Crown if he had raced in the Derby. But owner Sam Riddle hated what he called racing in the West and didn't believe in racing 3-year-olds early at a distance. But when War Admiral won the Chesapeake Stakes in Maryland by 6 lengths, he decided to try the Derby for the first time. A great crowd of some 75,000 gathered at Churchill Downs for the race. Trainer George Conway, a veteran of almost 50 years on the racetrack, had entered War Admiral in a full 1.25-mile allowance race just 4 days before the Derby. He won easily, but many wondered if that tactic would work. In the field of 20, War Admiral was a strong 2-to-1 favorite. War Admiral hated the starting gate, Derby or no Derby. He and 3 other horses delayed the start for 8 minutes. Eventually, though, they were off. Jockey Charlie Kurtzinger took War Admiral immediately into the lead. Pompoon and Reaping Reward, expected to be his chief opposition, bided their time in 5th and 8th places. War Admiral then was given an easy lead, so his rider could control the pace of the race from the front. Into the turn, War Admiral continued to lead with plenty in reserve. It was the tactic for Pompoon to make his one great run in the stretch, and so he did. But Pompoon's run only proved how good the Admiral was. Kurtzinger tapped him just once with the whip, and he seemed almost to be taunting Pompoon as they neared the wire. They would have to try different tactics if they were going to catch this horse. The victory was so impressive that people started talking Triple Crown as soon as the race was over. The time of 2:03 and a fifth was the second fastest Derby of the 63 that had been run. The Admiral was shipped to Pimlico that very night. Preakness Day was cloudy, the track listed only as good. Again, War Admiral held up the start, this time for 3.5 minutes. And again, Kurtzinger set him right to the lead. Pompoon looked like the only real threat in the field of 8. However, a couple of speed horses, Flying Scott and Jewel Dorset, kept the pace honest in the early going. So this time, War Admiral was in for a fight. Pompoon moved up to run with him earlier than in the Derby, and quickly it was clear that this would be a 2-horse race. A great battle down the stretch. Note, however, that while Pompoon on the inside is under steady whipping, War Admiral is never touched by his rider. Still, it was a near thing, victory by a head. Could he go 1.5 miles? Most people thought so, and he was made a 4-to-5 favorite for the Belmont. He was still his unruly self at the start, delaying it by more than 7 minutes. As always, he jumped to the lead, though, from the outside post as they started their trip around America's biggest racetrack, 1.5 miles once around. Pompoon was still chasing the Admiral in second choice again. This time he didn't have it and would finish 6th. The challenge, what there was of it, would come instead from an 8-to-1 shot named Scene Shifter. No challenge at all, really, as War Admiral set a new track record in sweeping the Triple Crown events. He came back lame from a cut suffered when he stumbled at the start. After a rest, he went on to become Horse of the Year. He had done what his daddy probably would have done if he had had the chance. Was he as good as his dad? Well, one race marred an otherwise historic career for War Admiral. He won 9 of 11 as a 4-year-old, but late in that season was matched with Seabiscuit, the pride of the West. It would be a mile and 3/16, winner take all at Pimlico. After 2 false starts, they were off. Unexpectedly, Seabiscuit, normally a come-from-behind horse, shot to the lead. War Admiral stayed with him, and it soon became evident that this would be a test of stamina and heart. Head and head, they came to the top of the stretch. But then there was disbelief as War Admiral, the 1-4 favorite, faded, and Seabiscuit ran to a 4-length victory in track record time. The Kentucky Horse Park is a beautiful place in Lexington, Kentucky, open to the public. Man of War and his favorite son, War Admiral, are buried there. War Admiral was a champion, no doubt about it, and except for that loss to Seabiscuit, might still be compared to his sire. But he did lose that race, and so must lie in the shadow of his daddy, whose groom called him with great accuracy, the mostest horse. His name was Whirlaway, and he was variously described as crazy, stupid, ornery, nervous, and brilliant. You couldn't miss him on the racetrack, his great chestnut tail flowing out behind him as he stormed from the rear. Crazy? Well, in his first race, he ran straight to the outside rail and followed it all the way, and still won. In the Saratoga Special, he almost fell at the start, was last when he bolted to the fence at the far turn, and still won. What could he do if he ever got straightened out? Well, trainer Ben Jones thought he could be a champion. And so did owners Warren and Lucille Wright of Calumet Farm. Jones worked with him all day, every day, in the winter and spring, and still he ran to the outside rail. So 4 days before the Derby, he went for his ace in the hole. He brought in Eddie Arcaro with the strongest yet softest hands in the business. He walked the track with Eddie early Derby day, not knowing that the rider, who had been out late the night before, hardly heard his instructions. And then the field of 11 was off before the first crowd of 100,000 in Derby history. Just before the race, Jones had the horse walk all around the track close to the rail, then paraded back and forth in front of the huge crowd to get him used to it. He came to the paddock long after the other horses. The trainer also had cut away Whirlaway's left blinker, letting him see the inside rail but not the outside rail or the crowd. Arcaro let his colt lope along at the back of the pack. This race would be run in the stretch. And watch him now as he moves to the front. The others looked as if they were walking. At the finish, he had a new Derby record, one that would stand for 32 years until Secretariat came along. Some found the result unbelievable. Could he have been on some secret drug? The post-race test said no. Arcaro credits the victory to Jones.
Ben Jones made him the winner. I got a lot of credit for it, and it really wasn't me. He took a knife and cut that blinker off him right in the paddock. And I said, have you ever done that before? He says, no, but I've seen it. I did it when I was around trotters. And I says, but this is a pretty funny place to be trying it, isn't it? He says, don't worry about it. It'll work.
Well, it sure did work. Would the supposedly tighter turns of Pimlico send Whirlaway to the fence again? Well, trainer Jones walked him around the inside rail again and hoped for the best. And Arcaro virtually walked him out of the gate this time. That's how much confidence he had developed in the little colt while winning the Derby. Watch here as he drops back, completely out of contact with the rest of the field. Nothing could bother him here because even their dust couldn't reach him. He showed no signs of running to the outside. But then, this was an unpredictable animal. You never knew what he might do or when. Even the great Arcaro, a fearless man, found this a little frightening.
He would scare you because you're running out of field. Now, where do you go with it? You didn't want to go out because you're always scared of him bull. We had him in the middle of that field running twice as fast as any other horse.
Watch him now as he moves into the middle of that pack of horses, then bursts out like a champagne cork. This was one of racing's greatest sights. Mr. Longtail, moving, as Arcaro said, twice as fast as the rest of the horses, preparing to bury his opponents once again. He was like a great actor, playing with his audience, teasing them, then knocking them out of their seats. And so he did in the Preakness. Showing off in the stretch. King Cole was in second place, but no merry old soul was he, as Whirlaway straightened out his tail and headed for home, headed for history now, not the outside rail. He was scaring them all off for the Belmont. And they stayed scared. Only 3 others went to the post in New York. Itabo tried to set a slow early pace, hoping to save his speed to challenge Whirlaway in the stretch. Arcaro, who could measure time in his head as accurately as a stopwatch, immediately rushed to the front. Halfway home, he led by 7 lengths. He loafed to the finish in the middle of the track and had brought Calumet its first Triple Crown. It was the beginning of a Calumet dominance that would last for many years. Whirlaway went on to become Horse of the Year and gained that honor again as a 4-year-old. The sight of him breezing home, hurrying his opponents, his long tail straight out, became a part of American folklore. There was only one black mark on his record. In September of 1942, he was lured into a match race at Narragansett Park in Rhode Island with a colt named Alsab. Like Sir Barton and War Admiral before him, he was defeated. After his retirement, Whirlaway stood for a time here in Kentucky, then was taken to France for stud duty. There, at the comparatively young age of 15, about 10 minutes after breeding a mare, he suddenly died in his stall. In time, his remains were brought back here to Calumet Farm, here to rest in the cemetery with some 50 other racehorses who had brought honor to the Devil's Red Silks. 2 years later came Count Fleet. His owner couldn't sell him as a yearling, but stable boy Sam Ransom said keep him. When he wants to run, he could just about fly. He raced for the wife of John Hertz, founder of Hertz Rent-A-Car, and was trained by a World War I balloon pilot, Don Cameron. Like the stable boy, Johnny Longden begged Hertz not to sell Count Fleet.
So it was during the war, you know, and I jumped on my bicycle and ran down to the corner and called him and asked him not to sell him. I said, I think he's a real good colt. He just immature yet, and he was going to sell him for $4,500.
The 1943 Derby was called the Streetcar Derby. Because of the wartime fuel shortage, out-of-town visitors were discouraged. The locals arrived by streetcar and watched the field of 10 parade in the paddock. Count Fleet was the heavy favorite. His daddy, Ray Count, had won the Derby. Now it was his turn. Number 5. Count Fleet broke quickly from that number 5 hole to take the lead. He had suffered a bad cut on his left rear hoop in the Wood Memorial. Serious enough that jockey Longden had ridden to Kentucky with him, holding ice on the wound. But now all was well, although there had been some doubt all week. A 12-to-1 shot named Gold Shower prompted the pace, while the second betting choice, Blue Swords, was 4th, just behind Slide Rule. But there never was any real question of the outcome. Count Fleet was the class of the field. As they came down the stretch, Blue Swords challenged, but not seriously. The horse nobody would buy as a yearling, the colt who was almost sold for $4,500 as a 2-year-old until jockey Longden made his plea, had won the Kentucky Derby. Back at the barn, he wore out his hot walker as he always did. This colt seemed inexhaustible. Then it was on to Baltimore in the Preakness just 7 days later. The owners had reason for confidence. Only 3 horses challenged Count Fleet, who was held at odds of 1 to 9. Only one other Derby horse, Blue Swords, was in the field as they left the gate. Vincenta was second choice in the betting. The 4th horse was New Moon of 49-to-1 shot. Blue Swords had finished second to Count Fleet 5 straight times, and today would turn out to be the 6th. The race made one recall those words of Sam the stable boy. Someday he's going to be one fine racer, he had said. When that leggy brown colt wants to run, he can just about fly. After 3/4 of a mile, he led by 4, and then he began to stretch out the lead. He loved to run, loved to bury his opponents, and jockey Longden gave him his head. The lead was 5, then 6, then 7, and at the finish line, it was 8 lengths. Would anyone challenge him in the Belmont? Well, Longden made no pretense that he was the colt's master. It was all very simple. Just let him go.
Going into the race, I thought he'd have to fall down to get beat. Then I thought he could get up and win. He was that good. He was just what you'd say was kind of a freak horse. He could do anything. He could go to the front, come behind, and run all day, run in the mud. It didn't make any difference.
Just to stay sharp, Count Fleet won the Withers between the Preakness and the Belmont. And on Belmont Day, only 3 horses appeared on the track. The second choice in the betting, Fairy Manhurst, was held at odds of 29-to-1. The other entrant, Deseranto, was 53-to-1. Count Fleet gave his supporters no anxious moments. After a half mile, he led by 8. After a mile, by 12. At the quarter, the lead was 20 lengths. Longden just enjoyed the ride as the Count ran and ran until he won by 25 lengths. How far is 25 lengths? Well, it's this far. Might any horse ever win the Belmont by more than this? Remarkably, the answer is yes, but that would be getting ahead of our story. Count Fleet had won the Triple Crown. During the race, he had suffered a slight injury to his near or left front ankle. It didn't respond to treatment, and he was retired from further racing. At Stoner Creek Farm, he became an outstanding stallion. One son, Count Turf, won the Kentucky Derby. Another, Counterpoint, won the Belmont. He lived to the great age of 33. Then his front legs gave out. For 2 days, the champion tried to rise on those legs that once could just about fly. He couldn't do it. He's buried where he was foaled at Stoner Creek. In 1946, the eyes of Texas and the nation were on Assault. King Ranch is a fair-sized spread, even by Texas standards, about 500,000 acres. It was the birthplace of Assault. The master of King was Robert J. Kleberg, and he engaged another Texan, Max Hirsch, to train his horses. Warren Mertens would ride Assault to a Triple Crown. On Derby Day, the colt was no better than 4th choice. Although he had won the Wood Memorial, he had finished a bad 4th in the Derby trial just a few days before the big race. Besides, he had a deformed hoof that bothered some. Lord Boswell was the favorite. After the start, Spy Song, 3rd choice in the betting, was hustled to the lead by jockey Johnny Longden. On the slow track, Lord Boswell ran into trouble and was back in the middle of the pack for most of the race. Assault was 5th after a half mile, 4th after 3/4, and was 3rd with that final long quarter of a mile to go. Then he made a daring move on the rail. Watch. Spy Song faded. Lord Boswell made a bid, but it was too late. Assault pulled away to an 8-length win in slow time. No horse has won the Derby by a greater margin. Assault had become the first Texas bred to win the Derby, and still there were skeptics about the slow time and the strangely formed foot. The largest crowd in Pimlico history, more than 42,000, gathered for the Preakness to see if Assault was for real. For the first time in his life, he was the favorite. But Assault, coming from the number 5 post, was squeezed at the start, allowing long shots named Tidy Bid and Natchez to go to the lead. To get back into it, Mertens had to use his colt's energy severely. He may have pushed him too hard. It wasn't apparent on the backstretch as Assault moved up. He took the lead midway on the turn, and coming down the stretch, he increased the lead to 4 lengths. But then he began to fade, and Lord Boswell began to close. Assault was staggering to the wire now, and just held on for a neck victory. But he had won. What about the 1.5 miles in the Belmont? Well, many thought no, and made Lord Boswell a slight favorite for the longest of the Triple Crown challenges. Assault stumbled slightly at the start and was taken back, according to plan, by jockey Mertens. He was determined not to run out of gas this time. He had moved into 3rd at the far turn. Mertens sent his horse in the stretch, and Assault was ready, moving up on Mrs. Walter Jeffords Natchez under Con McCreary. Now Assault was all power, no hanging on, just pulling away from Natchez to win the Triple Crown. He was retired to stud, tested sterile, and brought back to the races. Retired again, brought back again, raced into his 7-year-old season, and finally went back home for good. He had run his entire career on that fragile, odd-looking hoof, the result of stepping on a sharp stake as a weanling. How much heart did it take to run on that hoof? No one knows, but he lived with it until the age of 28, when he was put down and buried at King Ranch. How good was Citation?
He was just a standout, he really was. And the owners and, trainers and people that knew, all to this day say that he was the greatest 3-year-old that ever lived. He was the best that ever rode.
The best that Eddie Arcaro ever rode? Arcaro, the only jockey to win 2 Triple Crowns? The winner of 5 Kentucky Derbies in a career that spanned 3 decades? The best he ever rode? Yes, that was Citation. Some still call him the greatest ever. By Derby Day 1948, his reputation was such that only 6 horses entered, the smallest field in more than 40 years. Only win betting was allowed by track management. He had been 2-year-old champion, had beaten older horses early in his 3-year-old season, and now the Derby. Citation was part of the Calumet entry with his speedball stablemate, Coletown. Arcaro originally had favored Coletown for his mount, but trainer Jimmy Jones put him on Citation when his previous rider, Albert Snyder, was drowned in a boating accident. The track was sloppy. And some remembered that Citation had been beaten less than a month before at Havertide on an off-track by a colt named Saggy. Coletown quickly moved to the lead, as expected. Citation was comfortably placed in second. On the backstretch, Coletown had a big lead, but Arcaro still waited on Citation. When they came to the stretch, Clem McCarthy called it on the radio.
And they're turning for home. Coletown and Citation head and head, and it looks like Eddie Arcaro has got his derby. They're coming in there just like they were the enemy, riding each other close. And it is Citation coming to the front. He's everything they said he was. He's going to win with his ears pricking. It is Citation by 2, pulling away. And the other horse, Coletown, is hanging on gamely, but that's all he can do is hang on gamely to be second. Citation wins this derby.
It was a record 4th Derby win for Arcaro, the 3rd for Calumet Farm. At Pimlico, only 3 opponents showed up. Again, there was only betting to win. Citation had scared off every horse who had faced him in the Derby. He was held at odds of 1 to 10. Second choice Bovard was 9 to 1. King Ranch was represented by Better Self and Sonny Whitney by Vulcan's Forge. But to the crowd, there was only one horse, and that was Citation. It was little more than a good workout. The margin was 5.5 lengths, but it could have been anything. The second of 6 Preakness winners for Eddie. Surprisingly, 7 horses came to challenge Citation in the Belmont. His sire, Bull Lee, couldn't win at a distance, so they thought maybe, well, just maybe they'd give it a try at 1.5 miles. Citation stumbled slightly coming out of the gate, but from that point on, he took charge. In the early going, Faraway, owned by Man o' War's owner Sam Riddle and ridden by the talented Ted Atkinson, stayed with Citation. But Citation was under steady restraint, and Atkinson knew it. He could only hang on and hope for the best. Unlike the Derby and Preakness, the track was fast, and Citation was moving. He covered the 1.5 miles in 2:28 and a 5th. In the stretch, Faraway was far away and would finish last. The Triple Crown was Citation's. Big Si forever will be identified with his jockey that spring. It was Arcaro's 2nd Triple Crown. In time, he won 5 Derbies, 6 Preaknesses, and 6 Belmonts. He was tough, suspended for a year at one time. But a friend of his was a friend forever. He was the master. This was Citation's final home, Calumet Farm in Kentucky. Many of these trophies there are his. He ran until he became the first equine millionaire at age 6. As a stallion, he couldn't pass on his talent and heart. He lies near his siren dam now. Arcaro said, most horses have 1 move in a race. Citation, he said, he had about 8 moves in it. There was a long, long drought after Citation, 25 years, a quarter of a century with no Triple Crown winner. Some people were saying there will never be another Triple Crown champion. Never. And then along came this horse. Along came Secretariat, enjoying the favorite time of a stallion's day right now. One of the favorite times, certainly, his afternoon bath. But his favorite time of day when he was running was when they called him to the post. Secretariat was more than a racehorse, more than a Triple Crown champion. He was a national idol.
Secretariat on the outside that takes the lead. Sham holding in second. It's Secretariat moving away. He has it by 2.5. Sham then on the outside, our native. At the wire it's going to be Secretariat. He wins it by 6. There's a strong left-handed whip again by Pintide. He goes to it time and time again. But Ronnie Turcotte has his whip put away. And Secretariat has him put away. He's beginning to draw away. It is Secretariat. He's coming to the wire. He wins it. Secretariat is widening now. He is moving like a tremendous machine. Secretariat by 12. Secretariat by 14 lengths on the turn. Sham is dropping back. It looks like they'll catch him today, as My Gallant and Vice Prince are both coming up to him now. But Secretariat is all alone. He's out there almost a 16th of a mile away from the rest of the horses. Secretariat is in a position that seems impossible to catch. He's into the stretch. Secretariat leads his field by 18 lengths.
Of all the memories of Secretariat on the racetrack, this is the most lasting. Ron Turcotte, looking back, wondering where the rest of the horses were in the Belmont, winning by 31 lengths. Turcotte was a Canadian, a former lumberjack, later paralyzed in a racing accident. Owner Penny Chenery, then Mrs. Tweedy, became almost as famous as her horse, and rightly so. She had fought to save her father's stable when others wanted to sell. Even the groom, Eddie Sweat, became a familiar name to racing fans. From the beginning, Secretariat was a big horse and a big eater with a big heart. He showed it in his first start on the 4th of July. On the right, he was squeezed at the start by a colt ironically named Quebec, the home province of Secretariat's trainer. He managed to keep his feet, but fell back and was bumped into the rail. Still, he managed to finish fourth, only a length and a half back. Secretariat had heart. The arrow points him out in the hopeful stakes at Saratoga. Watch as he begins to pass horses. Secretariat by now had won a maiden race, an allowance, and the Sanford Stakes, but this time he really showed his stuff. He was a son of Bold Ruler, who passed on great early speed to his progeny, and Something Royal, a daughter of Prince Quillo, a great endurance runner. The combination of genes produced a colt who could do everything. Owner Chenery had won the right to Secretariat in a complicated coin toss arrangement with Ogden Phipps. No one argued now that she should have sold her father's horses. In this race, Secretariat stamped himself as something special, winning easily by 5 lengths. His stablemate Riva Ridge had won the Kentucky Derby in this year of 1972. Now Secretariat went on to win the Futurity in time faster than Riva Ridge had run in winning the same race the year before. He finished first in the Champagne, but was disqualified for ducking into another horse when hit with the whip. He never ducked before, said the rider. He never had to be hit before, the trainer said. He was named Horse of the Year as a 2-year-old. On Derby Day 1973, the biggest crowd ever to that time, 135,000, jammed Churchill Downs. They had come to see the big red chestnut with 3 white feet prove that a Bold Ruler colt could go 1.25 miles. A field of 13 went to the post. As expected, Secretariat came out of post position 10 slowly and settled into last place as they passed the stands for the first time. He had been syndicated for $6 million in a deal put together before he ever ran a race as a 3-year-old. The deal stipulated that he would race only for this season. His insurance for that year cost $500,000. So this was valuable property trailing the field. After winning the Bayshore and the Gotham in New York, he had been upset in the Wood Memorial, finishing 3rd behind Angle Light and Sham. Just the same, he was made a solid favorite in the Derby, and the bettors knew what they were doing on this day. Secretariat picked up horses all the way down the backstretch, then made a big move on the turn. At the quarter pole, Sham took the lead from the speedball Shecky Green. It became a 2-horse race. Secretariat and Sham battling down the stretch. Sham's rider was Lafitte Pinkai, known as the strongest jockey in the game in a stretch drive. But in the end, it was Secretariat, smoothly switching into overdrive, winning the Derby in a record time that would last for many years. The 2nd straight Derby win for owner Chenery, trainer Lauren, and jockey Turcotte. Now on to Pimlico.
And they're up for the early lead. That's Deadly Dream on the outside, Ecolitage. Then it's also Torsion on the outside. They're coming by us. It's Ecolitage getting it, and he's moving away by about 2.5 as they pass the stands. Settling into second, Torsion. Sham has good position, 3rd on the rail. It's another 3 lengths back, Deadly Dream. Then Our Native and Secretariat is last again as they move into the first turn. They're into the turn. Ecolitage has it by 2 lengths. Torsion second by a length, and then Sham 3rd. Sham under an easy hold right now. But here comes Secretariat. He's moving fast, and he's going to the outside. He's going for the lead, and it's right now he's looking for it. Ronnie Turcotte sends him alongside Ecolitage.
From there on, it was a duplicate of the Derby, except that this time Secretariat was in charge all the way. Sham, second in the Derby, would be second again, and Our Native once more was 3rd, and the margins were exactly the same. 2.5 lengths to Sham, another 8 to Our Native. Again, the Daily Racing Form clocker had it as a track record, but the official clock, which may have malfunctioned, said otherwise, and that was that. It was a great day for Meadows Stable, even though the owner was burned by a cigarette, her husband's pocket was picked, and her car was hit in the parking lot. How could that matter when you own Secretariat? Belmont Day was hot and humid. There were 5 horses, but everyone was watching just 2, Secretariat and Sham. Jockey Turcotte had noticed in the warm-up that Sham didn't look as sharp as usual, so he decided to test him early. Sham stayed with him for a while, but by the halfway mark, Secretariat was drawing away. At the half-mile pole, he led by 7. Sham faded and eventually finished last. It may have been the greatest performance ever anywhere.
Going to be the Triple Crown winner. Here comes Secretariat to the wire. An unbelievable, an amazing performance.
31 lengths in world record time. Penny Chenery thought of her father, who had died a few months before, and savored the great victory. But even Secretariat, was made of flesh and blood. Saratoga, that beautiful spa in upstate New York, is known as the House of Upsets, and one was waiting for Secretariat in the Whitney Stakes. Trainer Alan Jerkins, who specializes in surprises, had a 4-year-old gelding named Onion who had never won a stakes race, primed for the effort of his life. Secretariat couldn't peel this onion and lost by a length. In mid-September, the bugle sounded for the first Marlboro Cup, a race created for Secretariat. He was the only 3-year-old in the race, and the chief opposition was his stablemate, Riva Ridge. If Secretariat won, he would pass the $1 million mark in earnings. If the stablemates finished first and second, it would be the pinnacle of trainer Lauren's career. It turned into a match race between the two, but there was no doubt of the outcome. It was Secretariat all the way in another world record time of 1:45 2/5. The champion ran 2 more races in New York, losing the Woodward to Prove Out, another Alan Jerkins horse, winning his first stakes race like Onion, then winning the Man of War, his only race on grass. On a cold, rainy, windy October day at the Woodbine track, Secretariat made his only appearance in Canada, his trainer and jockey's native land. Unfortunately, the rider was serving a suspension and couldn't participate. Eddie Maple rode him that day.
The crowd is standing and they're cheering because this is his last race. He's in this section, a blaze of glory. Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen, he's all yours and he's coming to the wire. He's on top now by about 10 or 12 lengths. Secretariat has it.
So Secretariat won the Canadian International Championship and was retired. Appropriately for the horse who could run on anything, the course for that race was part grass and part dirt. 9 days later, he made a farewell ceremonial appearance at Aqueduct, then was sent to Claiborne Farm for stud duty. He was champion 3-year-old, champion grass horse, and horse of the year. No horse has ever been as closely identified with its owner as Secretariat was. Penny Chenery had fought for her father's stable, and when Secretariat came along, she won the hearts of the people just as her horse did. She was the embodiment of what the gracious lady horse owner should be. For some years, Secretariat was a good sire, but not great. But then came 1986 Horse of the Year, Lady's Secret, and in 1988, his son, Risen Star, who won the Preakness and the Belmont. Secretariat now had done it all. We're at Three Chimneys Farm in Midway, Kentucky, and this is Seattle's Slew, still at age 14, perhaps the greatest Cinderella story of the turf. The story has been told so many times of how Karen and Mickey Taylor bought him as a yearling for $17,500. His worth today, well, he's almost priceless. Unusual among the Triple Crown winners in that he was the first horse ever to go through the entire Triple Crown as an undefeated horse. The Taylors went to a Kentucky yearling sale with their friend and advisor, the veterinarian Dr. Jim Hill. Dr. Hill selected a dark brown colt by Bold Reasoning, who was a grandson of Secretariat's sire, Bold Ruler. They named him Seattle Slew. But at the Moncton, Maryland farm, where he got his early training from Billy Turner, they called him Baby Huey, after a clumsy but lovable comic strip character. He was clumsy. That and a minor injury prevented him from racing until September of 1976. Turner thought he had a good one, though. Slew won 2 races, then was sent into the Champagne Stakes as the favorite. He broke fast, went to the front and stayed there, winning the race by 9 3/4 lengths in the fastest mile ever run by a 2-year-old. He was turned out for the winner and named 2-year-old champion, coming back in an allowance race at Hialeah in early March. He won the 7-furlong race by 9 lengths. His insurance was increased from $2 million to $3.5 million. His jockey was the Frenchman Jean Cruguet. Man and horse seemed ideally suited. The first big race of the season was the Flamingo, and Slew made it look like an easy workout. After taking the lead on the clubhouse turn, he stretched it to 10 lengths before Cruguet got him to ease up. Turner didn't want him going too fast, so the lead dwindled to 4 lengths at the finish. Still, he ran the 3rd fastest time in 48 Flamingos at Hialeah. Turner continued his careful preparations and slowly got his colt ready for the Wood Memorial. 2 weeks before the Derby, Seattle Slew got his final test before his date with Destiny in Kentucky. It was the Wood Memorial at Aqueduct in New York, the race where Secretariat had finished 3rd before going on to the Triple Crown. Again, he made it look easy. After opening up a 6-length lead, he again was eased under Turner's instructions to a 3.5-length win. The dark brown colt was ready for Churchill Downs. Churchill Downs, under the Twin Spires, America's greatest horse race, and the favorite at 1-2 odds was the $17,500 bargain basement colt. Turner still was training the colt carefully with slow workouts. He was the most lightly raced animal in the field. There was some concern when Slew seemed to wash out in the crowded Churchill Downs paddock, a bad sign. But that was nothing compared to what would happen on the start. Now Slew was number 3. Watch, he came up high and sideways to the right, nearly unseating jockey Kruger. The field was gone by the time he straightened out. But Kruger went after the others immediately. Watch the black and gold silks as he finds himself behind a wall of horses, then begins to shoulder his way through, bumping another horse in the process. Remarkably, within a quarter of a mile, he was in second place behind For the Moment. The half mile was a swift 45 4/5. Chick Anderson called the finish.
Seattle Slew moving away, now opens 2.5. Dusty Run driving up on the outside into second. Steve's friend, here's Sanhedrin now closing also along the inside. Coming to the wire, Seattle Slew opens it to 4 lengths.
Seattle Slew now had proved that he could overcome adversity and that he could stay the distance of 1.25 miles even after he had been used severely. Soft-spoken Billy Turner was ready to praise him.
He broke slowly. He was shut off immediately. He had to overcome adversity, and then he went on to do what he's supposed to do, and this is a sign of a racehorse.
The horses were saddled in the infield for the Preakness, and as Kruger climbed aboard, Seattle Slew was a 2-5 favorite. Only 2 of the Derby horses were there. One was the runner-up, Run Dusty Run. Slew got off to a decent start this time and ran head-to-head with Cormorant for the first 7 furlongs. Also in the field was the 2-year-old champion of England from the previous year, J.O. Tobin. He was third choice, but never threatened. Run Dusty Run was 6 lengths behind at the turn. The mile was the fastest ever in the Preakness, and the final time would be the second fastest official time. 1 more leg of the Triple Crown to go, and Seattle Slew still was unbeaten in his career. On to Belmont. 71,000, the second largest crowd in Belmont history, came out to watch Seattle Slew try to become the first ever to win the Triple Crown while unbeaten in his career. He would have 7 opponents. The track was muddy as they started the long run around the Belmont 1.5-mile track. Slew had never run on an off-track before. Didn't bother him. He took the lead in the first quarter. By the stretch, it was evident that this was no contest. Kruger piloted his mount home smoothly, and as you'll see, gave a gesture of victory as he came to the wire. The Triple Crown was won. The owners wanted their horse to run on the West Coast. Billy Turner resisted strongly, but the Taylors insisted. There was a serious break between them. Turner went, but he didn't like it. The trainer's judgment was borne out when Seattle Slew was soundly beaten. J.O. Tobin, who had disappointed in the Preakness, gave the Triple Crown winner his first loss by more than 16 lengths. It would be Slew's last race as a 3-year-old and Turner's last race as his trainer. He was fired by the Taylors and their partners, the Hills. The rift couldn't be repaired. It was public and acrimonious. They looked around for a new trainer and came up with a young man named Doug Peterson. It would be his job to prepare the colt for a 4-year-old campaign, but Seattle Slew came down with a life-threatening virus, and it looked like his career might be over. He raced and won the next May, then was off again for another 3 months. Finally, in September, he was ready for a big race, the Patterson Handicap, under the lights. He looked like the old Slew at the start, quickly taking the lead from the outside post. He looked like the old Slew, but was he? Was his stamina what it once was? Well, not yet, it wasn't. He fought down the stretch with Dr. Patches, ridden by Angel Cordero, and looked like a winner for a few moments, but he couldn't quite make it. Still, he had a tough race in him now, and he was schooled for the big Marlboro Cup. What drama! Angel Cordero, who had beaten him in the Patterson, now the new jockey for Seattle Slew on the comeback trail, going against the teenage hero Steve Cawthon. And Las Barreras, Affirmed. It was the first meeting in history between 2 Triple Crown winners. Cordero, the world's best at stealing races in the early going, bolted Slew out of the starting gate. The only question was whether he could last the race. Everyone wondered. Well, he could last, all right.
3/4 at 10-1, and it's Seattle Slew holding the lead in the center of the racetrack. He's made it 3.5 lengths. Affirmed is taking up the chase on the inside, but it's still Seattle Slew's holding on. Nearing the finish, Seattle Slew has it by 4. Affirmed
So the old champ was back. He had put this year's Triple Crown winner in his place. But there was more work ahead. 2 weeks later, he won the Woodward easily over the European champ Exceller. Then there would be a rematch with Affirmed in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Again, he was facing Affirmed and Exceller. When Seattle Slew shot out of the gate, Affirmed went right with him, but the battle didn't last too long. They battled through 6 furlongs in suicidal fractions. But then Affirmed's saddle slipped and he dropped back. The real challenger it developed would be Exceller. Slew took a big lead and looked unbeatable, but Exceller put on a memorable rally, and by the stretch, the two were engaged in a duel that racing people still talk about. Exceller took the lead, but Seattle Slew summoned up another run from somewhere, and they sped toward the wire together. In the end, it was Exceller by a nose. After one more victory in the Stuyvesant Handicap, carrying 134 pounds, Seattle Slew was retired. As a sire, he has been a great one. Some of his progeny, Swale and Landaluce. First, he stood at Spendthrift Farm, later was moved to Three Chimneys. He became the most expensive stallion of all time, and each morning he has a chance to recall the good old days. He's ridden under tack, an unusual procedure for a stallion. And as he lopes along, you must wonder if his mind sees the long stretch at Churchill Downs upon occasion, if he recalls the cheering thousands who urged him on as he sucks in the clean Kentucky morning air at Three Chimneys. Here he lives like a king, and he has earned it. We've moved about 10 miles now from Three Chimneys Farm to the famous Calumet Farm, home of many champions. We've come here to see Affirmed, the 11th Triple Crown champion. But the horse being led out right now is Alydar. Never won the Triple Crown, but he's the only horse ever to have finished second in the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont, and he certainly belongs in our story because most people think that he would have been a Triple Crown champion had it not been for that one other horse, Affirmed. And there he is. It's appropriate that Affirmed and Alydar should be in adjacent stalls here at Calumet Farm, as they are, because they certainly were always close together on the racetrack. The margins in the Classics were a length and a half in the Derby, a neck in the Preakness, and a head in the Belmont. You don't get any closer than that. In his first stakes race, the Youthful at Belmont in June, Affirmed was a winner. It was hardly noticed that another colt, Alydar, finished 5th that day. There was much more to come. Alydar beat Affirmed in the Great American, but Affirmed came back to take the Hopeful at Saratoga in August. They next met in the Futurity at Belmont in September. The rivalry was in full flower now. The two colts battled it out all the way. Each had the lead in the stretch at one point, and when they came to the wire, it was anyone's guess. The photo showed that it was Affirmed. They were back at the beautiful Belmont plant for the Champagne on October 15th. It was the first time they had run as far as a mile, and Affirmed was a very slight favorite, but this time it would be Alydar storming from the outside in the final 16th who would win the day. They would meet once more that year. Steve Cawthon, the sensational teenager, was Affirmed's regular rider now. The Laurel Futurity was another classic. Alydar the favorite this time, but Affirmed charging on the outside, winning the 2-year-old championship for the Wolfsons. Their next meeting wouldn't happen until the Kentucky Derby of 1978. They started their 3-year-old campaigns a continent apart. Affirmed was in California at Santa Anita. He won a sprint and the San Felipe Handicap, then prepared for the Santa Anita Derby. Cawthon had been set down for a riding infraction, so Lafitte Pinkai was at the reins in this race to establish the West Coast Challenger for Kentucky. As was his habit, he took the lead from the start. It was an easy race for the son of exclusive native. Pinkai gave him the whip through the stretch, though, to keep his mind on his business. He won it by 8 lengths. Meanwhile, Alydar had spent the winter in Florida at the magnificent old Hialeah course with trainer John Veach, who couldn't wait for his colt to get revenge on the West Coast star trained by Las Barrera. Alydar was carefully prepared for the Flamingo Stakes, and he didn't disappoint. Alydar ran away from his field as Affirmed did in California. The build-up to the Derby was the most dramatic in years, with not one favorite now, but 2. On the way to Louisville, Alydar won the Bluegrass at Keeneland by 13 lengths. The usual immense crowd was there, including Affirmed's owners. Affirmed was well placed throughout the race, 2nd at the quarter, 3rd at the half, and 6 furlong marks. Alydar started slowly, was still 8th of the 11 starters at 3/4 of a mile. But Sensitive Prince took the early lead and set a tremendous early pace, but neither Affirmed or Alydar were biting. Affirmed moved up on the turn, but Alydar this time waited too long to make his bid. Believe It took the lead briefly, but Affirmed took over in the stretch. Dave Johnson called the finish.
Out of the stretch they come. Affirmed on the inside takes command again. Believe It is second. Alydar gains ground third. They're in the final furlong. It's Affirmed with Stevie Calton showing the way by 2.5. Believe It with Ed Mayfield is next on the outside. Alydar is third, but it's going to be Affirmed. Affirmed with Steve Calton is going to win this 104th running of the Kentucky Derby. Alydar is second. Believe It third.
And so the first big one of the big three was chalked up for Affirmed. Afterward, I asked Calton for his reaction. It was the week of the kid's 18th birthday.
It's a tremendous feeling. I didn't realize how good it feels until after the race, but it's something else.
Affirmed had the upper hand for sure as they arrived in Baltimore for the Preakness. The colts were so closely matched, but it was beginning to look like Affirmed had the extra edge every time now. The Wolfsons were there to see Affirmed, but Alydar's owners, Lucille and Admiral Gene Markey, were wheelchair-bound at their Calumet Farm home watching on television. Affirmed let the long-shot Track Reward lead briefly, but then took over and led after a half mile. Alydar was closer this time, about 5 lengths off the lead and then moving up, well placed for his stretch drive. That's Alydar in the devil red silks on the outside, moving up. The crowd sensed what was coming, and it was just what they had hoped for. Affirmed and Alydar. Those two on the front. Flying down the stretch now, writing the story of racing's greatest rivalry with their footprints. Stride for stride, nearly head for head. At the end, it was Affirmed again by a neck. Could they do it yet again in the Belmont? There seemed no reason not to. There were 3 other horses in the race, but they were merely spear carriers on this day, extras to serve as background for the stars. Calton. John Beach had a new set of tactics for this race. He wouldn't let Affirmed get away to lope on the lead, then pour it on in the stretch. This time, jockey George Velasquez would push the colt in the pink silks all the way, make him work for every inch. And at the end, well, who knows? Now he moved right up with Affirmed. It appeared that one of them had to give, as Affirmed stamped up the tempo. Alydar was right with him, though, and the crowd was so loud that it was difficult to hear the call as they raced in front of the stands.
The two are heads apart, and Alydar's got a lead. Alydar put ahead in front, right in the middle of the stretch. It's Alydar and Affirmed battling back along the inside. We'll test these two to the wire. Affirmed under a left-hand whip. Alydar on the outside driving. Affirmed and Alydar heads apart. Affirmed's got a nose in front as they come onto the wire.
And Affirmed had won the Triple Crown by a total margin of less than 2 lengths. Alydar had become the first horse in history to finish second in all 3 of the classes. In any other year, Alydar almost certainly would have won the Triple Crown himself. These were tired horses now, but after a rest, another meeting was still to come. It was in the Travers at Saratoga, the summertime derby, they call it in upstate New York. 50,000 people poured into the spa for the great day, wondering if the 2 colts could put on yet another fine show. In the early going, they got their money's worth. Alydar had learned now that he couldn't let Affirmed have his way, that he had to push him as he had done in the Belmont. As you will see, nearing the far turn, Alydar tried to pass his rival on the inside for the first time, but the hole wasn't there, and Velasquez had to pull him up. An inquiry or objection was inevitable. Affirmed went on to finish first, and Alydar, remarkably, got back into the fray and took second. That was important, because when Affirmed was disqualified, and there was the moment again, Alydar was moved ahead of him into first place. It was an inconclusive end to their great rivalry. But it was the last time they would ever meet. Despite defeats later in the season by Seattle Slew, Affirmed was named Horse of the Year. The next spring, Hollywood Park. After a couple of defeats, he went on another winning streak with his new jockey, Lafitte Pinkai. He had replaced Calton, who was in an extended slump. The race coming up was the Hollywood Gold Cup. He was carrying 132 pounds, the most in his career.
Now it's Affirmed in front by half length. Sirlad is second and Tex. Affirmed drawing out. Affirmed and Sirlad and Tex. And Affirmed is the winner by half length. Sirlad second.
He had carried that tremendous weight, 132 pounds, a mile and a quarter in a sensational 158 2/5. So Affirmed continued on his majestic way. With this victory, he passed Kelso as the all-time leading money winner and became the first horse to win more than $2 million in his career. Later, he traveled east, there to meet a new challenger. It was Spectacular Bid, winner of the 1979 Derby and Preakness. As with Pincay, he had a new rider, the great Bill Shoemaker, replacing young Ronnie Franklin. They were set for the start. And of course, Affirmed took the lead immediately. As you will see in the stretch, both Spectacular Bid and Belmont winner Coastal took their shots. That Spectacular Bid between horses, Coastal on the rail, but Affirmed once again was the winner and again would be Horse of the Year. One final touch was left. At Aqueduct later, he was paraded before the crowd one last time and then retired. He stood as a stallion first at Spendthrift Farm, then was moved to Calumet. There he joined his old rival Alydar in the stud barn, and now there would be a new rivalry. Which horse would be the better sire? Only time will tell for sure. This is where all Triple Crown stories end, at Belmont Park in New York, scene of the Belmont Stakes. 22 horses have come to the Belmont with a chance to win the Triple Crown. Only half of them, only 11, have succeeded. And as we've seen, 3 of them still live. Secretariat and Seattle Slew and Affirmed, passing on the genes that make champions down there in Kentucky. When will we see another Triple Crown winner? Who knows? We've had consecutive ones, Seattle Slew and Affirmed, and we had a 25-year gap. And now we've had a 10-year gap at least again. Whenever it will be, the horse that wins the Triple Crown has proved his worth. I'm Jim McKay.